This video will show you how to replace the front lower control arm forward bushing on a Pontiac Grand Prix. This is part of the front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. A quick note about doing this job, you will need a 4-wheel alignment when we're done. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we have a clear view of our front brakes. We're paying attention to the center where our axle nut is. I'm using a 34mm. I want to remove this nut and then break the axle free from the wheel bearing. To help break this free, I'm using a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle so I do not cause any damage. Now that I have movement from there, let's continue on behind this area. As we look behind this area, we're paying attention for where our lower ball joint connects to our steering knuckle. We're going to separate this area. Now, if you look in between the ball joint stud and the axle, you're typically going to find that you have a cotter pin that we have to try to make our way in between and remove. The mounting nut is a castle nut, and the cotter pin holds it, preventing it from loosening up. Now, since I'm working on the driver's side of the vehicle, I've turned the wheel all the way towards the left. If I was on the passenger side, I'd be turning it the opposite direction. As for that ball joint mounting nut, we're using an 18mm. Go ahead and turn that counterclockwise. We're starting to unscrew it from the ball joint. During the removal process of the mounting nut, you may find that it gets stuck on the axle. That's okay. We're going to continue on by separating the ball joint stud from the knuckle. For this, I like to use some penetrant in this area, and then I'm going to start lightly tapping. I need to be able to pull the ball joint stud down far enough that I can remove that mounting nut. To help separate this, I typically like to use a long pry bar for leverage. Looking at the control arm, you can see that we have circular ports. You can see one down on the bottom. It has the same exact thing along the top. I'm using my pry bar down and through this area. I'm applying light pressure. Now with my hammer, I'm going to be tapping on my steering knuckle where my ball joint stud is. We need to cause vibration to break this free. There we are. Let's carefully remove our pry bar and we'll continue on. So we're just going to separate this. I'm pulling down on the control arm and pulling that aside. So now as we look at the lower control arm, we're looking for the forward bushing. In this area, we have a T55 mounting bolt that comes straight up through this area. And then on the top, we have a 21mm mounting nut. Let's go ahead and remove this. I'm using my wrench up along the top. A thorough inspection of all hardware as we continue on, replace as necessary. Now we're making our way to the rear bushing. For this, we have an 18mm headed bolt coming through from the front. On the back side, a 21mm mounting nut. My mounting nut. As we start removing this mounting bolt, just keep in mind it's the last thing holding this in place. So we'll remove the bolt and remove the lower control arm. Now at this point, we're going to have to pull the lower control arm out and away from the subframe. It's tucked inside of the forward pocket and inside of the rearward pocket. If you need to, you can use a small prying device. Now let's get this over to the bench. Now as we bring this over to the bench, before we start removing the bushing, I want to pay attention to one thing. Looking at the forward bushing, especially the new one here, you can see that there's slots on the rubber bushing. That's the flex point, so we need to make sure we have it in the proper orientation during the installation process. We wouldn't want to install it improperly. With that said, I'm just going to make a clear marking. I definitely don't want to misplace this bushing. It won't function properly. For this, I'm just using a crayon. You can use whatever you want for making a marking. After making those markings, I also want to point out that looking at the brand new bushing, you can see that it has this flat base. That would be on the lower aspect of the control arm. We need to make sure we have that in the proper orientation as well. It's extremely important. So with all that said, we need to make sure that we have the proper tools to be able to remove the bushing. I had mentioned that the bushing has a flat base. It's a larger diameter than the smaller side there. So of course, when we press this through, we have to have a cup that's large enough for this bushing to go into. On the opposite side, this is where we're going to be driving it down. So you want to have something that can go along the edges. With that said, I'm going to be using my ball joint press and my adapters. Put one up along the top here. My bushing is extremely rotted. Typically there will be a ledge here that I can grab onto. When I go to press this, it's typically going to just go ahead and crush together just because of the condition of it. But once I do have it pressed out, we can dispose of it properly. So I have my lower cups. Get this over here. Bring our tool in. Slow and steady when setting this up. We want to be as safe as possible. We are going to be applying pressure to this. Just going to adjust my tool here. As I mentioned, mine is a little bit rotted. That's why I have to adjust my tool. Typically, it should just stay right in place. I want to be as safe as possible throughout this entire process. Now I can see that this is starting to come out of the control arm, which is what I want to see. I'm going to remove my tool and I'll continue on with a hammer. Just a couple light taps. We'll see if we can drive this out of position. There it is, friend. Now at this point, we need to make sure we clean and inspect this, but we're going to be installing it from the other side, so I'll just go ahead and turn this over real quick. On the opposite side, I've already transferred my markings. Let's go ahead and clean inside of the port, so when we install the brand new bushing, it will sit flush on this area. As far as cleaning my port on this, I can see that I do still have some rust or rot buildup from the original bushing. I'm going to cause some vibration, see if I can break this up, and then we'll continue on with some sandpaper on the inside as necessary. Just a small ball peen hammer. Now I have my sandpaper. I'll just wrap it around my finger, obviously, and being aware of any sharp edges. I don't want to get hurt. After thoroughly cleaning and inspecting the control arm, it's time for the installation of our brand new bushing. For this bushing, since I'm looking along what would be the bottom area of the control arm, I need to make sure I have the bushing in the proper direction. I have the flat flanged area up along the top since I'm looking from along the bottom. Now I'm aligning each one of those two flexible slotted areas with my corresponding markings on the control arm itself. When we go to press this down, we're going to be pressing along the base edge here, never along the center. We do not want to cause any damage to the rubber bushing. On the opposite side, I need to have a cup that's large enough for the opposite end of the bushing to slide into as necessary. Now I'll continue on with my ball joint press. We'll make sure we're as straight as possible. We don't want to drive this in at an angle, which could cause damage. Assuming it looks good, go ahead and apply some pressure here. Before I go too far, I'm just double checking to make sure the bushing is going down straight. As you can tell, mine is. Before removing my tool, I'm double checking to make sure I'm completely seated all the way around. This looks good. After removing the tool, one more quick inspection to make sure we're completely bottomed out. I can see that I am properly aligned with each one of my markings here. This is exactly what we need to see. Now we can get this over to the vehicle. Now, before we install the control arm in the vehicle, let's make sure we clean and inspect our mounting surfaces. So we're looking at the subframe. I'm cleaning this using a wire brush. A thorough inspection to make sure there's no damage. This looks good. Now, as we start bringing the control arm into place, you're going to find you have to pull away on the steering knuckle. Let's try to align this. We'll bring it in as straight as possible. Now we'll continue on with our mounting hardware. I'm starting at the front. We have the forward mounting bolt that's going to go up and through, and on the top we have a mounting nut. Now we are not tightening this yet. Let's continue on to the rearward hardware next. As far as this rearward hardware, it comes in from the front area and slides inward. On the rearward side, we have our mounting nut. Now the next thing we have to do is make sure we have the control arm in the proper positioning prior to tightening and torquing these. We want to have the control arm at original ride height position. Now, since we do not have the ball joint attached, we should be able to lift up on the control arm. We'll bring it so it's essentially flat with the ground. And now we can tighten that hardware. I'm starting at the forward mounting hardware, snug it up, and then torque it to 92 foot-pounds. With the control arm still in the proper ride height position, let's continue on to the rearward hardware. Same torque for this one. At this point, let's get the ball joint stud back in the knuckle. Things to pay attention to as we start bringing this down: we have to pull the knuckle in. When we bring this in, make sure the axle slides into the wheel bearing. Get my ball joint stud ready. Now it's time for our ball joint mounting nut. When we go to install this, we're going to bottom it out. The torque for this is 15 foot-pounds plus an additional 120 degrees, which is essentially a third of a turn. Once we've done that, we're going to have to align the port for our cotter pin. Looking at the ball joint stud, you can see it has a small hole. And looking at the ball joint mounting nut, you can tell that there's several slots for that cotter pin to slide through. If it's not properly aligned, continue tightening the mounting nut until the very next slot is, and then install that cotter pin. I'll be using an 18mm for my mounting nut. There we go. Now, to tighten or torque this, you may find it's easiest if the wheel is turned all the way towards the side of the vehicle that you're working on. Same as during the removal process. All right, so there's that. Now it's time for that additional 120 degrees, or 1/3 of a turn. I'm just going to use a regular ratchet for this so I don't cause any damage to my torque wrench. Go a little further there. After making that additional turn, I'm paying attention to the slots on that castle nut, just as I mentioned. I want to make sure I'm properly aligned with the port, and if it's not, I'll just continue tightening until it is. I have a brand new cotter pin. Slide it straight on through. On the opposite side, obviously I have to pin this over. I want to make sure this nut does not loosen up while I'm driving down the road. Now it's time for the axle nut. We'll make sure we start that on by hand. Now, when you go to tighten this, you may find that this entire thing rotates on you. To help prevent that, we're just using a screwdriver inside the rotor cooling fins down along the bottom. So when we turn this clockwise, it'll go up against the brake caliper and prevent it from spinning. Now to tighten this, I'm going to be using a hand tool. We want to make sure that it's snug. We're not using an impact tool because we don't want to cause any damage to that bearing. Now, after bottoming it out, we're going to be torquing it to 118 foot-pounds. Let's reinstall our wheel. Start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. Once you have them all started on, snug them up. We'll get the wheel back on the ground and then torque each lug nut to 100 foot-pounds. Now that I have the wheel back on the ground, I'm going to be torquing each one of my lug nuts to that 100 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. Now the next thing you have to do is take your vehicle for a road test. You're going to listen for any odd noises and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.